This Christmas Eve has been anything but quiet in Washington after President Trump's surprise announcement that he doesn't support the COVID relief bill passed by Congress. The U.S. House of Representatives met briefly today and rejected two proposed revisions to increase direct checks for individuals and to remove foreign aid. Now, without Trump's signature, millions of people hoping for economic assistance this holiday season will be left waiting. On Saturday, pandemic unemployment benefits are set to expire, and on Monday, the government will run out of money. The House and the Senate will return early next week for a planned override of Trump's veto on a defense bill. Meanwhile, President Trump is spending Christmas Eve in Florida, but he continued his flurry of pardons late yesterday. Just this week, he has more than doubled his acts of clemency from the previous 4 years. William Brangham picks up the story.
That's right, Amna. President Trump added 29 new pardons and commutations last night, and there were many familiar names on the list, including Charles Kushner. He is the father of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. But there were also two new pardons for people connected to special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe, former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and Trump confidant Roger Stone. Those two joined three others from that same investigation who were pardoned earlier this month. For more on all of this, I am joined by Andrew Weissmann. He was the lead prosecutor for special counsel Robert Mueller. Andrew Weissmann, very good to have you on the NewsHour. We now have 5 individuals who you and your colleagues helped convict who were all guilty of lying or obstructing this investigation. And now they have been pardoned by the President of the United States. I mean, this has got to be a relatively dark period for you.
Well, that's an understatement. I spent 20 years at the Department of Justice, and career people there are trained to apply the rule of law. And what we're seeing now is the pardon power being used to undermine the rule of law. And with Paul Manafort, he didn't just lie to the government. He engaged in tens of millions of dollars in bank fraud, tax fraud, money laundering. He lobbied for a foreign government in the United States illegally. He obstructed justice by tampering with witnesses while he was even out on bail in a criminal case. So this is not a upstanding citizen. And I'd ask viewers to think about if you were exercising the pardon power and trying to mete out justice to the most deserving applicants for a pardon. Are these the people you would choose? Corrupt politicians, corrupt law enforcement officials, people who've committed murder, a healthcare fraud defendant who committed billions of dollars in healthcare fraud. These are really sort of outrageous exercises of the pardon power by the President of the United States.
I mean, this has got to imperil in some way. If I'm any future special counsel, special prosecutor who's trying to investigate a president or allies of the president, this has got to make my job in the future incredibly difficult if I simply know that with a nudge, nudge and a wink, wink, the president can signal to people, I've got your back. You don't have to worry about what these prosecutors do to you.
Absolutely. That, I think, is exactly the right point, which is to focus on what the precedent is here. As bad as it is in terms of what the president is doing now, we had to deal with the dangling of pardons, and that is trying to thwart the incentives that people have to cooperate. The way that investigations are made is people come in and tell you the truth, and they know that if they don't do that and they lie, they've committed a crime and they could be prosecuted. But if you dangle pardons and then, as we've seen in the last 2 days, make good on that dangling, it really undermines the ability of a nation that it holds itself as a nation of laws to actually say the president is not above the law, because de facto he's using the pardon power to make himself above the law.
You have suggested recently that these pardons could in fact backfire on President Trump. Can you explain how would that happen?
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon because, well, the pardon power in the Constitution is incredibly broad. One thing that is not clear is whether the president himself can pardon himself. So while he can pardon Paul Manafort and Roger Stone, it's not at all clear that he can do that with respect to his own past crimes. And what you can look at today in terms of the various pardons as sort of the final act of his obstructing justice. In other words, he's carried through, as you mentioned, with the dangling by saying, you know what, if you just keep quiet, you will get a pardon. And now we're seeing it done. So the new attorney general, when he or she is named and confirmed, is going to have on his or her plate the issue of whether to hold the former president to account in the way that, frankly, other nations around the world hold their leaders to account. So it wouldn't be unusual to do that.
I mean, there is a big if embedded in there as to whether or not whomever Joe Biden selects as attorney general chooses to go down that route. If you were still in the DOJ, do you think that knowing all of the political and sort of psychic turmoil that the country went through, would you encourage the new AG to pursue this, to keep this case going?
I think I would. I by no means say that this is an easy decision, but we're supposed to be a nation that believes in the rule of law. And if the president of the United States is allowed to obstruct justice and there are no consequences, as you mentioned, it's not only unfair with respect to this president, but the precedent set is really terrible. I have this anecdote that I think is really important for people to know, which is when Paul Manafort was convicted by a jury in the Eastern District of Virginia, the one juror who spoke out said it would be a huge mistake to pardon him. And she said, I voted for the president, but I left my MAGA hat in my car because I understood that I had taken an oath to uphold the law and follow the facts and render a true and fair verdict. And I think that is a real lesson for all of us, including the next attorney general, to decide on how to deal with the kind of corrupt behavior that we have seen. And I really don't think in many ways that you can move on until you do deal with what's happened and don't sweep it under the rug.
Lastly, in just the short time we have left, it's hard not to notice that Attorney General William Barr's last day was yesterday. Now we have a deputy attorney general in that position for the remainder of the president's term. Do you think that these pardons had anything to do with that timing or not?
I don't know the answer to that question. I suspect that the answer is no, and I would hope that the new attorney general, in the very few days that he has remaining to him, acquits himself well in the honor of the Department of Justice.
Andrew Weissmann, very good to have you. Thank you very much.
Nice to be here.